What if you met a time traveler? It began like any other forgettable Tuesday. You were walking down Market Street in San Francisco, a lukewarm latte in hand, earbuds buzzing a podcast about productivity you'd forget by nightfall. The world around you moved in predictable patterns, cars humming by in waves, street vendors yelling over each other, businessmen in tailored suits pretending their lives were more important than yours. The city had its rhythm. So did you. Until he broke it. He stood on the opposite corner at the crosswalk, completely still, as if the city's current didn't touch him. At first glance, he looked ordinary. Late 30s, unremarkable build, clothes that didn't quite belong. Too symmetrical, too polished, like a computer-generated image of how a man should dress in this decade. But it wasn't just that. It was how he looked at you. Not at you exactly, into you. You turned away, uncomfortable, only to find him still holding your gaze when you looked back. The light turned green. He didn't cross. He raised his hand slightly, palm up, and whispered something. Your earbuds caught the exact phrase, "You're not supposed to see me yet." You froze. When you stepped into the crosswalk, cars honked. The world jolted back into motion, but by the time you reached his corner, he was gone. No trace, like he had evaporated into thin air. You told yourself it was nothing. Maybe a weird street performer. Maybe a prank. You let it go. Until the second time. 4 days later. Different place. Same man. You were in a bookstore this time, flipping through a biography of Oppenheimer when he appeared at the end of the aisle. "I told you," he said calmly. "It's too soon." Your heart jumped. "What do you mean?" He looked down at his wrist, a sleek band of light that pulsed once, soundlessly, and whispered, "Curiosity opens doors that don't close." Then he vanished. Not walked away, not slipped behind a shelf. One moment there, the next, gone. No exit, no footsteps, no explanation. This time, you couldn't dismiss it. You spent the next week in a haze, reading articles on quantum physics, time dilation, multiverses. You searched forums where conspiracy theorists gathered and disappeared. You scrolled through blurry photos of time travelers caught in 920s crowds wearing sunglasses or wristwatches. Most of it was nonsense, but the seed had been planted. Could it be real? What if time travel wasn't just science fiction? What if it already existed, but wasn't meant to be public? What if the man wasn't trying to recruit you, but warn you? The world around you remained normal, or pretended to. And then came the third encounter. You were sitting alone on your apartment balcony. 3:17 a.m., the street below empty. He stepped into the light like he had always been there. "You've started looking," he said. You nodded. "Who are you?" He didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled something from his coat, a small disc, smooth and black, no seams. He placed it on the table beside you. It hovered a centimeter above the surface, humming softly. "That's from 2638, he said. "We call it a quantum key. It doesn't exist yet in your timeline. It shouldn't be here." You stared at it, stunned. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you'll be responsible for everything that follows," he replied. "And I need you to understand the weight of your choices." "What choices?" He looked you in the eyes. Whether to tell anyone, whether to stop what's coming, or let it unfold. Then he vanished again, and for the first time, the city around you felt artificial. Like a set on a stage you hadn't realized you were performing on. You didn't sleep that night, you barely blinked. The disc stayed hovering, still humming. By morning, it was gone, but your world had already changed. Because if time travelers exist, they are not here to give us secrets. They're here to keep us from discovering them ourselves. And that, more than anything, is what makes time dangerous. Not the ability to change the past, but the temptation to rewrite the future. Before that night, you had never questioned time. It was just there. Invisible, reliable, unremarkable. A river flowing in one direction, forward. You lived in it without thinking. You planned your days, set alarms, watched the clock tick toward deadlines. It was a utility. A background process, as fundamental and unquestioned as gravity. But now, every second felt like a clue. The next morning, you dove headfirst into research. Not the kind of idle Googling people do when they wonder if cats can taste sweetness, but real research. Academic journals, quantum physics lectures, white papers on temporal mechanics. You were looking for proof, or at least an opening, a crack in the wall of accepted reality where this man might fit. And you found it. Not certainty, but possibility. The world, you discovered, had already been edging toward the impossible. Take quantum entanglement. Two particles separated by light years, yet they respond to each other instantly. No signal, no delay. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, but modern physicists know it's real. We still don't fully understand how. It defies classical logic, but we accept it because it works. Then there's time dilation, proven by satellites and high-speed jets. Atomic clocks tick more slowly the faster you move. Gravity bends time. Even your feet age more slowly than your head, infinitesimally, just from standing on Earth. The rules of time are not rigid. They stretch, they ripple. And now, AI had begun modeling scenarios once considered science fiction. Massive quantum computers, like Google's Sycamore or China's Zhukongzi, were solving calculations once thought impossible. Some researchers believed we were within decades of modeling entire timelines, testing what-if scenarios in controlled simulations, not just predicting weather, but predicting decisions. In fact, several black-budget government programs reportedly explored theoretical time manipulation. DARPA's known interest in time-sensitive quantum cryptography raised eyebrows. Russia's Kronos files, leaked in 2023, suggested research into tachyon-based data transmission. Most of it sounded speculative. But so did the moon landing, once. Socially, we were preparing for the unthinkable too, without realizing it. The internet had already broken time's monopoly on truth. Every moment was archived, time-stamped, retrievable. TikTok trends resurrected songs from decades ago. AI resurrected voices of the dead. Reality blurred. And culturally, something was shifting. Films, shows, books, Tenet, Dark, The Midnight Library, Everything Everywhere All at Once, all explored non-linear time. It was no longer niche. It was mainstream. A collective subconscious preparing for something it couldn't name. Still, society functioned under the assumption of linear cause and effect. Courts sentenced people for past actions. Banks accrued interest. Birthdays ticked up by ones. The illusion of time's straightness held everything together. Until someone bent it. The man you met wasn't a glitch. He was a product of this momentum. A signal from a future that wasn't supposed to leak into now. You began seeing signs everywhere. Code hidden in blockchain ledgers that mimicked non-linear patterns. AI models refusing to forecast beyond a certain point. Inexplicable disappearances of data from otherwise secure servers. As if something, or someone, was editing the timeline, trimming unwanted branches. You joined forums under aliases, whisper networks, groups who believed that time travel wasn't a question of if, but already. They shared urban legends of men who knew too much, children who remembered lives they'd never lived, objects that didn't belong to any known era. But unlike conspiracy theorists, these people had evidence, dates that didn't align, video loops that contradicted GPS time, flight logs showing passengers who boarded but never disembarked. The more you dug, the more it made a terrible kind of sense. The world was never static. We were just looking at the wrong speed. And maybe, just maybe, we were on the edge of a threshold. Not the creation of time travel, but the acknowledgement of it. Because for it to work, it didn't have to be a public event. There didn't need to be a machine or a press release. Time travel, by its nature, would be secret, controlled, shielded from the very paradoxes it risked creating. And you, an ordinary person walking through life, had somehow wandered too close to that secret. You weren't chosen, you weren't special, you were simply unlucky enough to notice. And now, you couldn't unsee it. The clock was ticking, But you weren't sure in which direction. It didn't happen with a bang. There was no announcement, no sirens, no celestial flash. The moment everything changed came wrapped in routine. It was a Tuesday afternoon again. You were at your favorite cafe, half listening to a barista complain about oat milk shortages while scrolling through the news on your phone. Then the headline popped up. Live broadcast interrupted by man claiming to be from the future. Offers coordinates timestamp. At first, you dismissed it as another viral prank, but something about the photo embedded in the article made your fingers freeze. It was him, the man from the crosswalk, the man who vanished. You clicked the video. The clip began mid-sentence. He was standing behind a podium during a tech convention keynote in Chicago, wearing the same impossible clothes, the same light-wrapped band around his wrist. No credentials, no pass, just appeared on stage, unannounced, between speaker transitions. "I'm not here to disrupt," he said calmly. "I'm here to warn." Security approached. He raised his hand. The video glitched. When it resumed, he was already gone. Just like that. But the strange part wasn't just the disappearance. It was what he left behind. On the stage floor, in perfect symmetry, were coordinates, burned into the laminate. Latitude, longitude, and a date. August 17th, 2027, 3:43 a.m. UTC. It was 2 days away. For most, it was a curiosity. For conspiracy forums, a prophecy. But for governments, it was panic. Within hours, the location, an abandoned research facility in northern Norway, was swarmed with NATO personnel. Satellites were repositioned. No-fly zones were declared. Still, nothing happened. Not at 3:43, not for the rest of the day. Until the signal came, not through satellites, not via broadcast, through dreams. Thousands of people, across time zones, countries, languages, reported the same dream that night. A vast, metallic city beneath the ocean. A chamber where clocks melted. A man in white whispering numbers backwards. Some dismissed it as mass hysteria, others as a psychological experiment. But dream researchers at Harvard recorded identical EEG patterns across test subjects on opposite sides of the globe. That had never happened before. The data pointed to something no neuroscientist could explain. Synchronized perception without physical contact. Then came the second anomaly. At 4:12 a.m. UTC, a telescope in Chile picked up a brief but intense burst of neutrinos, particles that rarely interact with anything. The pattern matched no known natural phenomenon. But one scientist recognized the sequence. He had seen it in a classified file, part of a failed attempt to simulate time compression. Suddenly, all eyes turned back to the man at the convention. He hadn't simply vanished. He had transmitted something. You watched the world react in real time. Some people brushed it off, buried under doomscroll fatigue. Others believed this was the beginning of disclosure, the long-awaited reveal that time travel was real and tightly managed. On Reddit, theories exploded. Some claimed he was a time cop trying to stop someone worse. Others believed he was a defector, leaking future secrets one breadcrumb at a time. But you knew better. You'd met him before the broadcast. He'd chosen you for a reason. Then, on the third night, your phone rang. No caller ID, just static at first. Then a voice. "Are you listening now?" It was him. You didn't speak. You felt it, didn't you? The dream. The pull towards something unexplainable. He continued, voice like metal scraped across glass. "Time is not a line. It's not a loop. It's a field. A field we've poisoned again and again. I wasn't the first. I won't be the last. But the question is, what do you do now?" The call dropped. Your phone refused to turn back on. You stared into the dark, realizing the world had just passed a threshold it didn't know existed. And the people in power weren't in control anymore. Because now the public had seen it. Not a theory, not fiction. A man in the flesh, leaving behind physical proof, tied to impossible events. The genie was out. The future was bleeding through the cracks, and no one knew how to stop it. The world didn't collapse overnight. It never does. Instead, it adjusted. Awkwardly, unevenly, chaotically, like a house settling after an earthquake. Still standing, but never quite the same. In the days following the incident in Chicago, the term chrono event entered mainstream vocabulary. News anchors hesitated over it. Scientists avoided it. But governments latched onto it. Within a week, both the US and European Union had quietly formed special task forces under newly created agencies. Their mandate: monitor, assess, and contain anything resembling temporal interference. Still, the public reacted first. On social media, timelines flooded with footage of the man's speech, slowed down, analyzed, dissected frame by frame. Forums speculated that the shimmering band on his wrist was a temporal anchor. TikTokers made parody sketches of future me arriving to sabotage awkward situations. It became a trend, a joke, a costume, until it wasn't. Then the sightings began. A woman in Lagos swore she saw a man blink into existence on a pedestrian bridge and vanish seconds later. In Sao Paulo, traffic cameras recorded a blurry figure appearing in the middle of an empty highway, then disappearing without crossing it. A school security camera in Japan caught a man walking backward, literally against the flow of time, footage playing forward, yet showing him reverse in perfect control. The internet split in two. One side screamed, "Hoax," desperate to restore the safety of disbelief. The other dove headfirst into the rabbit hole. You were already there. But the real transformation wasn't online. It was behavioral. People began acting differently. The stock market, long driven by fear and speculation, entered a bizarre phase. Investors poured money into obscure technologies: quantum sensors, anti-neutrino detection, cold clock mapping. Companies with even vague connections to temporal studies saw valuations skyrocket. Meanwhile, traditional models for risk collapsed. If tomorrow could change, how could you bet on today? Economists tried to explain it. They failed. In neighborhoods, daily life shifted too. Strangers asked weirder questions. Do you remember what color that billboard was yesterday? Have you seen anyone out of place lately? Churches started holding time integrity services, urging followers to pray for linearity. Some people left notes for their future selves in jars. Others built panic rooms lined with analog clocks, hoping to escape what they called timeline drift. And then came the tech boom. Startups began developing wearable devices claiming to detect temporal irregularities. Most were scams, but a few tapped into legitimate anomalies. One company sold sunglasses that allegedly filtered residual time distortion. Another offered DNA tests to check for chrono-resistance markers. It didn't matter if the science was sound. The market believed, and when belief turns viral, truth becomes secondary. Governments scrambled to keep up. The Pentagon launched Project Helix, a secretive research initiative aimed at identifying nonlinear travelers. Leaked documents showed psychological profiles being built from massive datasets, search histories, location pings, biometric readings, trying to flag individuals whose behavior suggested they weren't native to the current timeline. It was the start of a quiet paranoia. But through all of this, the memes, the markets, the ministries, few people asked the one question that mattered. Why now? Why had time travelers, if real, begun revealing themselves now? Was it an accident or a countdown? The man you saw, the one who contacted you, had warned you. Curiosity opens doors that don't close. You didn't know it then, but his warning wasn't about you. It was about us. As a species, we had always reached too far. Fire, flight, fission, we were addicted to progress. But time? Time was a different kind of fire, and now we had lit the match. Still, not everyone was panicking. Some celebrated. Atin. Innovators, technologists, and philosophers saw this as the next evolution. If time could be explored, bent, navigated, then humanity wasn't limited to space anymore. Chronotourism, temporal medicine, even the possibility of resurrecting extinct cultures or preventing ancient tragedies. It was the ultimate liberation, or the ultimate delusion, because what no one was paying attention to, in the euphoria and chaos, were the warnings. The small ones, the subtle ones, clocks that skipped seconds, people who remembered different pasts, cities where birds stopped migrating. Minor things, for now. But reality, your reality, was beginning to tear. And the worst part? No one wanted to admit it. The world didn't implode. It unraveled, quietly, like threads slipping from a sweater that still looked whole from a distance. At first, the changes were so small they could be dismissed. A street sign in your neighborhood had always read Elm Avenue, but now it said Elms Avenue. Your coworker swore she remembered a client meeting that had never been scheduled. A viral clip from a comedy show in 2016, one you'd quoted 100 times, now featured a different punchline. Mandela effects, they called them. Collective false memories. The internet chalked it up to psychological glitches, confirmation bias, bad memory. But this time, the occurrences became too consistent, too widespread. People began documenting them, cross-referencing screenshots, physical copies, printed archives, and what they found was terrifying. Entire minor realities were changing in real time. Books had alternate endings. History textbooks added events no one remembered. Photos showed people smiling at weddings that, by all records, had never happened. It wasn't a mass delusion. It was timeline bleed. And it was getting worse. Your own body wasn't immune. You began to feel off. Your dreams grew longer, deeper, dreams that stretched across decades, lifetimes, worlds you never lived in but somehow knew. Waking up felt like surfacing from another version of yourself. Your reflection didn't feel like yours. You weren't losing your mind. You were experiencing temporal instability, subtle shifts in reality as your consciousness struggled to anchor itself in a timeline that was moving. You weren't alone. Hospitals reported a rise in temporal disorientation syndrome. Patients claimed their loved ones looked different, that their birthdays had shifted by days or months, that entire chunks of memory were missing, or worse, newly implanted. Neuroscientists were baffled, therapists overwhelmed. In the meantime, geopolitics twisted. Nations began accusing each other of chrono-warfare, manipulating micro-events in the past to alter power balances in the present. A trade deal between India and Australia collapsed after one side cited a version of the agreement the other had no record of. China denied involvement in a cyber attack it had already publicly admitted to the week before. Except now, the press conference never happened. History itself became unstable currency. And in the chaos, opportunists thrived. Corporations began selling chrono insurance, protection against timeline fluctuations. If your property title changed, if your child's school suddenly moved districts, if your legal documents shifted subtly overnight, they would restore your original reality. No one understood how it worked, or if it worked at all. But millions bought in. Meanwhile, black markets exploded with devices promising to lock personal time. Necklaces that recorded your own subjective continuity, tattoos embedded with memory microchips, pills that claimed to stabilize temporal perception. Some users reported success, others disappeared entirely. Through it all, one thing remained constant. The travelers stopped hiding, not in crowds, not in back alleys, not in whispers. They walked openly now. You saw one on a subway, tall, silver-eyed, wearing clothing stitched with moving light. No one acknowledged him. But when the train stopped, the power flickered and time paused. Just long enough for you to see him looking directly at you. You didn't speak. You didn't have to, because you'd begun to understand. This wasn't about discovery anymore. This was about containment. The rules of time weren't broken by accident. They were being bent systematically. Someone, somewhere, was pushing reality past its structural integrity. And like a bridge carrying too much weight, the timeline was starting to crack. Not all at once, not with a bang, but with fraying logic. Language began to shift. Children started using words no adult had ever taught them. Maps redrew coastlines subtly. Some regions gained hours in their day, others lost them. Sleep patterns changed globally. Then, most chillingly, came the echoes. People began reporting conversations that hadn't happened yet. Arguments with spouses over events days in the future. Emails showing timestamps that made no chronological sense. A mother in Toronto called her son, only for him to answer saying, "Mom, I just called you an hour ago." Her phone said she had made the call first. Reality was overlapping itself, folding, misfiring, looping. You were no longer living in a single, stable version of the world. You were drifting through a tangled weave of timelines where cause no longer preceded effect and consequence came before decision. And worst of all, you had no way to tell which reality you originally belonged to. To understand what was unraveling around you, it helps to step back and look deeper, beyond daily experience, into the very fabric of reality. Time, as we perceive it, is often imagined as a straight arrow. One moment follows another in an unbroken sequence, but modern physics tells a far stranger story. At the heart of the mystery is space-time, the four-dimensional fabric that binds space and time together. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, mass and energy curve space-time, creating what we feel as gravity. But it's not just gravity warping space. Time itself bends, stretches, and slows down depending on speed and gravity. Consider the famous GPS satellites orbiting Earth. They experience time differently than we do on the surface. Their onboard atomic clocks tick faster or slower due to both their speed and distance from Earth's mass. Without correcting for this time dilation, GPS locations would drift by kilometers each day. This isn't science fiction. It's everyday technology relying on our understanding of time's elasticity. Now, add to this the bizarre quantum realm. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superpositions, being in multiple states or places simultaneously until observed. They can be entangled, sharing instantaneous connections no matter how far apart. This spooky action at a distance, as Einstein called it, suggests reality is interconnected in ways classical physics cannot explain. Enter the idea of quantum time. If particles at the smallest scales don't behave predictably in time, could time itself be quantized or fluctuate? Some theoretical physicists propose time isn't continuous, but made of discrete chronons, tiny indivisible units. This would mean time could jump, skip, or fold, rather than flowing smoothly. This concept links to the idea of closed time-like curves, theoretical loops in space-time where an object could, in principle, return to its own past. Wormholes are often discussed as hypothetical bridges connecting distant points in space-time, possibly shortcuts through time itself. While unproven, these ideas hint that nature's laws might allow time travel under exotic conditions. The advent of quantum computing adds another layer. Quantum processors manipulate qubits that represent superpositions of states, allowing calculations on many possibilities simultaneously. Imagine running entire multiverse simulations, predicting how timelines could branch and merge. Some researchers speculate that future AI might detect or even influence timeline divergences, nudging reality toward preferred outcomes. Biologically, time's effects on living organisms are subtle yet profound. At the molecular level, DNA replication errors accumulate as cells divide, contributing to aging, a biological clock counting down our lives. If time can fluctuate, could these processes speed up, slow down, or even reverse? Some experiments show certain enzymes repair DNA with surprising efficiency, hinting at potential for biological rewinds. In theory, if time could be manipulated locally, it might alter health and longevity. There's also the role of consciousness. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics propose that observation collapses probabilities into reality. If human awareness interacts with quantum states, could consciousness influence time's flow? This speculative notion connects to reports of temporal perception shifts, moments when individuals feel time stretching or compressing, as during trauma or intense focus. Lastly, consider information. Information in physics is fundamental. It cannot be destroyed, only transformed. If information from the future could leak backward through subtle quantum effects or advanced technology, it might explain phenomena like déjà vu, prophetic dreams, or the echoes you've experienced. All these ideas form a delicate web of possibilities. They hint that time isn't a simple river, but a complex, dynamic tapestry woven from threads of gravity, quantum uncertainty, information, and consciousness. If time travelers exist, they navigate this tapestry expertly. They might anchor themselves using quantum locks, devices stabilizing their presence in a particular timeline. They must avoid paradoxes by preserving causal consistency or risk tearing the fabric itself. And the strange events around you? Skipped seconds, timeline bleed, shifting memories. They're symptoms of a fabric strained beyond its limits. Science today is on the cusp of understanding these phenomena. But for now, it remains a mystery wrapped in mathematics, philosophy, and the human experience. One thing is certain: the rules of time are far stranger and more fragile than you ever imagined. For years, the anomalies had been mere whispers, strange glitches, fleeting moments of dissonance in an otherwise stable reality. But eventually, the fractures deepened. The thread holding together our timeline began to fray so severely that collapse no longer seemed a distant possibility, but an imminent threat. The first major crisis came unexpectedly. Cities across the globe experienced what scientists later called chronoquakes, temporal tremors that distorted cause and effect in localized pockets. In Tokyo, commuters found trains arriving before they departed. In London, newspapers reported tomorrow's headlines hours in advance, only to retract them minutes later as events changed. Traffic lights blinked erratically, sometimes turning green and red simultaneously, causing confusion and accidents. Governments declared states of emergency. Streets flooded with emergency responders equipped with analog devices and low-tech backups designed to operate outside digital systems vulnerable to temporal disruptions. The stock markets plummeted. Currencies fluctuated wildly as trades were recorded out of sequence. Trust in systems that depended on linear time, financial, communication, transportation, eroded rapidly. At the heart of the chaos was a terrifying realization: the timeline was losing coherence. Past, present, and future began to blur, their boundaries dissolving like mist. Human cognition, finely tuned to a linear experience of time, began to falter. Cases of chronodissociation skyrocketed. Patients who couldn't distinguish memories from possible futures or felt themselves slipping into alternate realities. Hospitals overflowed with those trapped in temporal limbo, unable to firmly grasp the present. Social order weakened. Conflicts erupted over resources as supply chains faltered. Governments argued over the control of temporal hotspots, areas where time was more unstable, and deployed troops to secure them. Misinformation spread like wildfire, fueled by conflicting reports of events that may or may not have happened. In this vacuum, fear transformed into panic. Religious groups proclaimed end times, citing the unraveling of the sacred timeline. Cults worshipping the timekeepers emerged, preaching surrender to the inevitable temporal collapse. Others clung desperately to technology, seeking salvation in devices promising to anchor consciousness in stable time. Meanwhile, time travelers, the ones you'd glimpsed in passing, became more visible and vocal. Some attempted to broker peace between factions. Others acted as enigmatic arbiters, enforcing unseen rules. But the fractures were too deep, the variables too complex. Behind closed doors, secret organizations debated radical interventions, temporal quarantines, selective timeline pruning, even the possibility of resetting reality entirely. The ethical implications were staggering. How do you decide which timeline deserves to survive? What right do any have to erase entire realities to save another? And what of the countless lives caught in the crossfire? Each unique, each irreplaceable? Public trust eroded further as governments withheld information, enforcing strict controls on media and communication. Surveillance expanded under the guise of temporal security. Whispers of disappearances, people who vanished without explanation, circulated, fueling conspiracy theories and mistrust. Amid this growing chaos, your own reality fractured. Friends you'd known for years claimed different shared histories. Places you frequented shifted locations or ceased to exist altogether. You struggled to hold on to your identity, questioning what was memory and what was illusion. This was the breaking point, the moment when humanity faced not just an external threat, but an existential one. The threat wasn't a meteor or a war. It was time itself. And as the threads of reality continued to unravel, the question loomed larger than ever. Could humanity survive a collapse of its own timeline? Or would we become ghosts trapped in an endless loop of fading realities, forever lost between what was, what is, and what could be? When the timeline began to unravel, humanity faced a choice: surrender to the chaos or fight to reclaim control over its fractured existence. Governments, scientists, and everyday people joined forces in a desperate struggle to stabilize reality. The response was as unprecedented as the crisis: sprawling collaborations bridging politics, disciplines, and ideologies, driven by the primal human urge to survive. One of the boldest efforts emerged from Project Kronos, an international coalition of physicists, engineers, and ethicists. Their goal: develop a network of temporal stabilizers, advanced devices designed to anchor local pockets of reality, restoring linear flow, and repairing fractures in space-time. These stabilizers were complex marvels, combining quantum entanglement fields, gravitational wave modulators, and AI-driven feedback loops to counteract timeline distortions. Strategically deployed in temporal hotspots, areas where anomalies were most severe, they acted as beacons of order amidst the chaos. Yet technology alone could not fix the deeper problem. Human society itself needed transformation. Social structures adapted. Governments shifted toward decentralized models, embracing fluid leadership responsive to rapidly changing conditions. Communities formed around shared temporal realities, often cut off from each other by divergent timelines, but united internally by new codes of cooperation. Ethics evolved in real time. What did it mean to consent to actions when the future was unstable? How could accountability exist if consequences shifted unpredictably? Legal systems adapted, incorporating temporal contingency clauses, laws accounting for multiple potential outcomes. Philosophy and spirituality also flourished. New doctrines emerged, blending science and mysticism, proposing that time was a living entity with which humanity must coexist, not conquer. Rituals developed to honor the flow of time, fostering mindfulness of moment-to-moment existence rather than distant futures or past regrets. At the same time, people began embracing radical personal adaptations. Some chose temporal exile, volunteering to live in isolated, stabilized zones cut off from mainstream reality, where time moved predictably, but opportunities were limited. Others pursued chrono-integration, augmenting themselves with neural implants designed to synchronize perception across shifting timelines, enhancing adaptability but risking identity fragmentation. In the midst of this, time travelers, once elusive and enigmatic, became crucial allies and advisors. Their intimate knowledge of temporal mechanics helped guide interventions and prevent paradoxes. However, mistrust remained. Many feared that travelers had their own agendas, manipulating humanity's fate for reasons unknown. Amid all these efforts, humanity also looked outward. Colonizing other planets, once a dream motivated by survival of the species, gained new urgency. Temporal instability on Earth drove accelerated research into off-world habitats where time might be more stable. Mars colonies incorporated time vaults, secure temporal sanctuaries insulated from Earth's fluctuations, intended as seeds of future civilization. The fight was not only scientific or social, it was moral. As timeline pruning and resets were debated, questions about who decided the fate of entire realities sparked fierce debate. Could one justify erasing a timeline to save another? Was it ethical to sacrifice some futures for the survival of others? These dilemmas forced humanity to confront its own values, compassion, and hubris. Even ordinary people participated in this grand experiment. Art, literature, and music reflected the new temporal consciousness. Stories told from multiple perspectives, paintings depicting layered moments, songs looping and fracturing time signatures. Humanity was learning to live within uncertainty rather than resist it. The struggle was far from over. But despite the fractures, the confusion, and the fears, a fragile hope persisted. A hope that humanity could not only survive the unraveling of time, but emerge transformed, wiser, and more connected to the flow of existence itself. The unraveling of time had brought humanity to the brink, but it also opened a door to something new, something unimaginable, a future rebuilt from the fragments of countless possibilities. As the stabilizers hummed across temporal hotspots and the world adapted to a fluid reality, a new kind of society began to emerge, not fixed or linear, but layered and multidimensional. Cities were no longer confined to geography alone. Communities formed around shared timelines, linked not by proximity, but by synchronicity of experience. Virtual networks became temporal bridges, allowing people from alternate realities to communicate and collaborate. This wasn't just globalization, it was chronoglobalization, the weaving together of lives across temporal threads. Technology evolved in tandem. Temporal interfaces allowed people to glimpse alternative versions of their own lives, exploring what-if scenarios as educational tools and sources of empathy. Historical archives expanded into living simulations, where users could immerse themselves in events from multiple perspectives, reshaping our understanding of history itself. Philosophy and ethics matured too. The rigid distinctions of cause and effect softened, replaced by an acceptance of uncertainty and flux. Decision-making embraced probabilities rather than certainties, fostering humility and open-mindedness. The concept of personal identity expanded to encompass multiple possible selves, versions of you existing simultaneously in overlapping realities. This shift brought profound cultural transformation. Art, literature, and storytelling flourished in new directions, reflecting the complex, intertwined nature of experience. Narratives no longer followed neat beginnings and ends, but branched, looped, and spiraled, mirroring the evolving tapestry of existence. Music incorporated temporal modulation, creating compositions that played differently for each listener depending on their temporal tuning. On a deeper level, human consciousness seemed to evolve. Practices rooted in mindfulness, meditation, and altered states became widespread, helping individuals navigate the fluidity of time and preserve coherence amidst flux. Some reported heightened intuition and precognition, suggesting a subtle attunement to the temporal field. Governments transformed as well. National borders blurred, replaced by temporal jurisdictions that recognized and respected the existence of alternate timelines. New forms of governance emerged, dynamic, adaptive, and decentralized, focused on stewardship of the timeline rather than rigid control. Even our relationship with death changed. With advances in temporal biology and medicine, diseases tied to the linear aging process became manageable or reversible. Concepts of lifespan stretched, allowing humans to experience extended nonlinear life trajectories, skipping forward or revisiting past states without loss of identity. Yet, even in this new dawn, challenges remained. The risk of timeline fragmentation still loomed. Paradox policing became an essential, though often invisible, task. The balance between exploration and preservation required constant vigilance. But humanity was no longer a passive traveler on time's river. We had learned to swim its currents, to ride its waves, to craft our own path within its vast, shifting flow. In meeting the time traveler, you glimpsed this future, a world transformed not by control over time, but by harmony with it. And in that harmony lay hope. Hope that despite the fractures and chaos, humanity could transcend the boundaries of linear existence and embrace a more profound understanding of self, reality, and the infinite dance of time. As you stand at the edge of this extraordinary journey, from the first glimpse of a man who shouldn't exist to the unraveling and rebuilding of time itself, one question lingers. What does it all mean for us, here and now? Meeting a time traveler isn't just a fantastical encounter. It's a mirror reflecting our deepest fears and highest hopes about the nature of reality and our place within it. Time, once perceived as an immutable line, reveals itself as a dynamic, fragile, and astonishingly complex tapestry. It reminds us that what we take for granted, past, present, future, is interwoven and subject to forces we are only beginning to understand. Perhaps the most profound lesson is humility. Humility before the vastness of the cosmos and the mysteries it holds. Humility in recognizing that our actions ripple across not only space but time, influencing futures yet to unfold and echoes yet to be heard. It also teaches caution. The allure of bending time is immense, but the consequences are profound and unpredictable. Like playing with fire, tampering with the temporal fabric risks burns we cannot easily heal. But beyond caution, there is hope. Hope in humanity's capacity to adapt, to innovate, to collaborate across divides, temporal or otherwise. The very crisis of time's unraveling sparked new ways of thinking, new social structures, and deeper empathy born from the awareness of multiple realities and selves. This story challenges us to reconsider our relationship with time, to move beyond seeing it as a relentless taskmaster driving us from one deadline to the next. Instead, it invites us to embrace time as a living process, fluid, interconnected, and full of possibilities. It calls us to mindfulness, to be present in each moment, aware of its fleeting beauty and its power to shape what comes next. And it opens the door to imagination, to wonder what else might be possible if we dared to step beyond the linear, beyond the boundaries we've accepted. As for you, having met the time traveler, you carry a unique burden and gift. The knowledge that time is not simply something that happens to us, but something we are part of, something that can be both guide and mystery. So what would you do? Would you try to warn the world? Would you seek to protect the fragile weave of reality? Or would you embrace the chaos and explore the infinite branches of possibility? There is no single answer. The story of time travelers, paradoxes, and shifting realities is also a story about choice. Choice to fear or to hope. Choice to resist change or to grow with it. Choice to see time not as a prison, but as a landscape waiting to be explored. In the end, the man who vanished leaving you with that quantum key was not just a visitor from the future. He was a messenger, a reminder that the future is never fixed, that the threads of time are woven by us all, and that every moment, every decision, is a stitch in the endless fabric of existence. So look closely, listen deeply, because the question remains open. What will you do with the time you have? Thank you for joining me on this journey through time, possibility, and the fragile fabric of reality. If this story made you wonder about your own place in the flow of time, or sparked your curiosity about what lies beyond the linear, then you're not alone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the mysteries that shape our world and beyond. Share your thoughts. What would you do if you truly met a time traveler? How would it change your view of the past, present, and future? Remember, the future is unwritten, and every choice we make is a thread woven into the grand tapestry of existence. Until next time, keep asking what if, and keep exploring the impossible. See you in the next video.